Thank you so much for joining the second Ginni AI webinar. My name is Mai Medhat. I'm the founder and CEO of Ginni, and I'm very excited for today's discussion. And for any of you, if you don't know about Ginni, we are building an AI tool to help sales teams. We're building an AI assistant, an AI coach, and strategy engine to empower growing B2B sales teams. Basically, we want to push everyone to be a top performer and win more deals. And we want to help companies build strong sales foundation. So I led sales team for almost 10, 12 years. I have a lot of passion for B2B sales, and I'm very excited for today's discussion. We have a special guest today, Omar. Omar Aboufandi is the founder and chief revenue officer at Salesfinity. Omar, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining and thank you for your time. Uh, Very excited to have you.
Absolutely. No, it's a pleasure to be here and thank you for doing this with me, Mai. Excited for our
Sure,
discussion.
sure. Let's start by a quick introduction. You have the space. Introduce yourself and Salesfinity, what you do. I know you have a very interesting background.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thank you. So as you said, Omar Aboufandi, originally a clinical pharmacist, transitioned somehow into tech. Since I've been in tech, I've mainly been in go-to-market. So my experience has mainly been around building territories or building companies from the ground up. Most recently, obviously, founding Salesfinity, based in San Francisco as a company. And what we do is we help sales teams, specifically in the B2B space, completely transform their performance by giving them more opportunities, having more conversations, mainly focusing on the dialing aspect and the kind of conversational aspect of sales, not so much around emails, but essentially we automate a lot of the workflow that sales reps would kind of be going through on a daily basis. And so far we're pretty much global with customers all over the world. Um, Very excited to talk a bit more about what I'm doing and also maybe the wider picture around B2B sales.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you, Omar. I think a very relevant experience to what we're discussing today. So for everyone, if you have any questions at any time, please post it on the chat or the questions tab. We'll go through this at the end. And so today we have a lot to discuss. I think starting from outbound sales, cold calling, and AI in B2B outbound sales. So let's dive in. Um, so let's start by, I think, the biggest question. Is cold calling dead? Is it still relevant in 2024? What do you
Yeah,
think?
the classic question, right? Is this dead?
Yes.
Is that dead? It's all we see nowadays. And I think it's very funny because the real answer is everything is dead. And that's because I feel like people have lost sight of what sales actually is. And I think one thing that we're pushing at Salesfinity a lot is this whole ideology around you're selling to humans, right? Unfortunately, recently, in the past few years, because of the massive funding and the kind of growth at all cost mentality, where you can just pour money into sales teams and expect them to perform, we're seeing teams just have thousands of emails being sent every day, making hundreds of calls, etc., etc. So we see selling almost like a tick box. I've completed call one. I've sent email two. When you do that today in 2024, everything is dead. Um, Mainly focusing on cold calling, it definitely is not dead. I probably wouldn't be here now if it was. What is dead though is the way it is executed, and obviously happy to dive deeper into that. But number one, making cold calls is very effective, but it's very difficult. It's scary for a lot of people, and it's very time consuming. it's probably the most effective channel in most B2B sales teams globally today, but it's also the least efficient. That's kind of the gap that's massive and that we're bridging. But yeah, maybe some follow up questions. I can obviously dive a bit deeper into why it's not dead.
Yeah, this is actually very interesting. So you're saying it's the most effective channel, but it's the most time consuming. Do you have any stats on that? Do you have any numbers to share, like how effective it is? What's any conversion rates compared to, for example, cold emailing?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of actual stats, I can tell you that mainly focusing on the US market, for example, and the UK market, most B2B new opportunities today, and we're talking about somewhere between 50 to 70% in most B2B companies or startups are sourced on the phone. So it takes maybe 10 times more to get that one opportunity on the phone, but it's also the channel that's converting the highest and the fastest to date. Obviously, there is a massive variance across industry, location, what you're selling, the stage you're at, the branding, the marketing that's accompanied with your cold call strategy and kind of getting your brand out there, et cetera, et cetera. But from what we're hearing, speaking or working with literally thousands of B2B sales teams from smaller startups all the way to multi-billion-dollar companies, cold calling is still the number one channel that everyone is really trying to optimize. Um, Unfortunately, though, the biggest issue around it is that in America, for example, only 3 to 5% of people pick up the phone. And in Europe, it's very similar, but it's roughly 6 to 8% of people in Europe and the UK will pick up the phone. In the Middle East, it's higher. It obviously depends a lot on the region.
Mm.
But when you think about, I mean, it sounds maybe good that you have a 6 or 5 or even 10% conversion rate from a cold call to a conversation or to a connection. But when you think about the 90% of the time that is wasted, it does obviously become a bit of a challenge. And that's why some people are saying that it's dead. America is definitely going through a crisis when it comes to phone calls. People are receiving more calls than ever. But it's dead if you just do like whatever anyone else is doing. If you just copy everyone, you've got to obviously be very, very intentional, very strategic. Um, so yeah, those are the stats off the top of my head.
Yeah, actually, like personally, I stopped like answering any calls from people that I don't know, especially when I was based in the Middle East, especially if I'm in Egypt, because we get a lot of like random real estate calls. That's very annoying, very disturbing, and it's too much to be honest. So I'm curious to know, like, in your opinion, is cold calling on its own, should it be like the first step, or is it part of a sequence? Like, how do you really make sure it's effective? Like, do you start by calling a lead for the first time, or do you prospect them, give your brand, put your brand out there, and then include a call in the beginning, in the middle of the sequence?
I guess the nice answer is not an answer that I can, I guess, give because from our experience, it very much differs on the company again. If you've got a very strong brand, if you're doing a lot of marketing, if you've been around for a little while, if maybe you have other channels that you're powering to support your cold calls, it might make sense to just start with a phone call. If you have nothing and you're a very early stage startup and you're kicking off your go to market from the start, it might make sense to get the phone as your first step in your sequence. So it's not really kind of one thing or one size fits all. From my personal preference would be some email potentially, although I do not think emails are anywhere near as effective as they used to be. But at least it kind of slightly warms up that call. Because if you know if you call someone and you speak to them and you mention where you're calling from, even if they didn't really read your email, they might at least recognize it. They might stay on the phone for a few seconds longer to hear you out. But again, the real like the realistic answer is it really depends on a few different factors and what other channels are supporting your cold call strategy.
Okay. I think we have a lot on the audience who are founders or sales managers and even salespeople. I think the question is basically when to choose cold calling and how to. I think the biggest question is how to structure a call to actually spend this or attract the customer to actually spend this few seconds with you and then eventually book a meeting.
Okay. Very good question. And I think I'm incredibly passionate about this specific topic because unfortunately, the reason why so many things are dead, go to market is dead, emailing is dead, cold calling is dead, outbound is dead, inbound is dead. The list goes on. Everything is really dead today. Is because even though it's 2024 and we should have learned so much from the past 10, 20 years in the tech boom, most companies, especially early stage startups that are doing the most incredible work, will talk about themselves way too often. And they often forget to address the actual problem. So a lot of messages, whether it's email, LinkedIn, phone calls, they don't really touch on the person, your target's life. They just basically showing off. We do this, we've developed this, we're the best at doing this. These are our customers. It's all about me, me, me. So I'm talking in a general sense here, but narrowing it down to the calls, the best way to start a call would be, I mean, there's so much, I guess, so many opinions around the first 30 seconds, but the way to see a phone call, it should be structured into four different components. Number one is the opener. How do you start the call? Do you start with, hi, how are you? Hey, did I call you at a bad time? Hey, we haven't spoken before. Can I have 30 seconds to tell you what this call is about? Obviously, in whatever language you're calling into, some sort of opener. Some will ask permission. Some will kind of try and go straight into it. Again, the data doesn't really show one to work better than the other, but from our own data and our own preference is definitely seeking permission because you don't want to start off on the wrong foot. It's like identify or show that you know you're an interruption because they didn't expect the call and kind of show them that you're not intending to spend too much time, only 30 seconds or so. Are you good to kind of hear me out? So that's the first part is the opener that should usually last around 30 seconds. From that point, this is the most important part. It's the problem statement. This is where most companies fail because from our own data, only about 20 to 30% of connections turn into conversations. And the difference between a connection and a conversation is a connection is anyone that picked up. If they hung up, it's still counted as a connection. A conversation will last either 45 seconds or 1 minute, which means you're actually having a dialogue. So the part that most people fail at is getting after going past the initial 30 seconds. And it's because they make everything about themselves. We are Salesfinity. We automate your cold calls. We will, we are Ginni. We are the best coach, AI coach. We turn your reps into absolute superstars. It's all about us, us, us. And I feel like prospects have heard way too much of that. There's thousands of startups popping up every day. So unless you're just getting straight to the point and talking about the problem that they care about, you need to make them feel like you know their world in the shortest and most detailed way possible. So you mentioned one or two or three main problems that you see, and then you just, give it back to them. How does that resonate with you? I'm wondering if you're seeing that too. Again, obviously, this is just in English. I know the audience is from all over the place, but you can kind of tailor it to the culture, the language. There might be some adaptations to be made, but this is the general structure. And then from that point, you just stop talking and listen. And you essentially try and ask questions to funnel them into the direction that you want to proceed the call in. I'll stop at the middle of the call, but any questions, and then maybe we can kind of dive a bit deeper into the third component and the fourth component of the cold call.
Uh, this is very insightful. Like, how do you capture? Like you mentioned that you start with listing problems. how do you define the problem? Like if you have different ICP, do you start with picking like one thing, or you mentioned like two, three things? Because usually, especially for early stage startups, you have this big market and your solution can actually solve multiple bits and pieces from the problem. I think identifying the message itself or the problem itself is one of the hardest actually jobs out there. Um, what's your what's your take on this?
What I often see, it's a good question. What I often see is startups or sales teams or go-to-market teams, they don't segment enough. So they'll probably guess what their ICP is, especially if you're early. You still don't know because you don't have product market fit. You can't really confirm your ICP. So you have a good idea as to why this is your ICP. And you also have a hypothesis around their problems and hoping that your solution actually resonates. The best way to do it is to kind of develop a problem message persona fit or segment the personas that you're calling into. So maybe you can sell to the CTO, but you can also sell to the head of AI. You can also sell to engineering managers. So each of those will have a very slightly different problem. CTO will look at things from a very high level. So the problem you mentioned could still be the same problem, but just described from a much higher angle. So instead of think like, with them, I'll just make something up, but with a CTO, if you're selling some sort of product solution, it's something around, hey, we noticed that products are inflexible because teams are overwhelmed with new features. And as a result, we're hearing that this is delaying new funding rounds because it's blocking revenue growth. Are you seeing that too? Like that's kind of CTO slightly language because you're angling it at a very high level. When it comes to if you're speaking to an engineering manager, you'll describe the same problem, but you'll focus more on the kind of day-to-day aspect. We're often finding engineering managers are stuck between delivering on projects, but also not hiring fast enough and ramping, which is delaying projects, which is obviously having an upstream and a downstream effect. How does that resonate with you? This is a very I completely made this up. It might not even be accurate, but that's kind of the segmentation that I'm talking about is you know what your problem does, you know what your solution does, you know the problems you solve, and then you have to develop a few different problem statements and map each of them to the persona that you're reaching out to. And that's essentially how it can be also reflected in a cold call or in an email, whatever the challenge, whatever the channel is.
Interesting, and I totally agree with that. Um, let's go back to the structure of the call. You said you covered the first two segments. What's next
Yeah.
if the customer is interested?
You see, that question about if the customer is interested is often actually it's obviously the ultimate aim. We just want to know, is this person interested or are they not? But I think if we dive even deeper and we segment the different outcomes of a cold call into interested, meeting booked, interested, wrong time, nurture, um, interested, referral. Essentially what you're trying to get to is you have a list of people you think you can sell to them, you think they might be interested, but the ultimate aim is to find out, to get a completion. It's not to book a meeting, it's not to get a genuine interest. It could be a completion, and a completion is, it could be an interest, it could be a disqualified, and that's going to lead me on to the third part of the cold call. Maybe that person is disqualified, or the account you've realized they signed a 5-year deal with your competitor. There's just no point reaching out. You can disqualify the entire account. So you narrow your focus. Or it could be a referral. So those are essentially the desired outcomes of a call. It's to get a completion, not so much to get a confirmed interest or a meeting booked. The third component of the cold call is around qualification. That's the part where you let the prospect speak after you've gone through the problem statement. You ask if it resonates. If it doesn't, you can obviously funnel some questions like, interesting to hear. Often when I hear that, it doesn't resonate, it's because it could be X, Y, or Z. what is your take on this? How do you basically just ask very good and open questions to get them to open up, and then you have a mini qualification where you ask questions to understand whether this person is even the right person, whether this account is even the right account for you to be speaking to if it's a brand new net new account, especially for early stage startups, or whether maybe this isn't the right person, but they'll lead you on to the next person, or whether you treat that call just as an insights gathering call where you gather lots of insights and then you take those to someone either higher up or alongside them that will lead you to the right direction. So the third part is just a discovery where you just ask questions. You don't try and sell, you don't try and pitch. And from my experience, when you ask all the right questions and you're speaking the right language and you're getting the person to engage, believe it or not, you don't even have to really sell your solution, because if you are describing a problem so well, you know exactly what the solution is. You might just say something like, okay, Omar, what does your solution actually do? We automate cold calls, and plug all the data back to your CRM and all the places you need. 10 seconds. But I know I called you in the middle of, something. So why don't we set 30 minutes aside? So it's a better time for me to give you a better overview and we can cover some of the problems you described in more detail. So that's really the only selling that you pretty much do. You sell using the problems and using the connection of them understanding, okay, this person really knows my world. He must have a solution. He only gave me a little teaser, but I really want to find out more. The biggest issue on cold calls is when people try to sell the solution on the call, and then there's no need for them to meet with you. They already got it. Like you basically just gave them, you removed all the excitement, and then, oh, I'll think about it. I'll discuss it internally, and you never hear back. So that's the third component of the. I kind of covered the fourth one. The fourth one is the close or the CTA, and it's around, hey, you cover everything you've heard. Like, hey, I know I called you out of blue. I appreciate your insights. It sounds like X, Y, and Z challenge is definitely happening in your world. I know I only mentioned a few things about how we can solve this with AI automation and X, Y, and Z. Why don't we, or would it make sense for us to have 15 or 30 minutes on this day at that time? You give them one or two choices to maybe discuss this further. And then you try and get a call, you try to get a close. So the whole concept of sell the meeting is very incorrect. You have to just treat a call as a more strategic process where you're either gathering insights, you're either validating your problem statement, you're even validating your script and what you're saying, you're maybe getting to the right person, or you're completely disqualifying this person or completely disqualifying the account. So there's so many different outcomes. It's not just make a call, book a meeting. That's very short-sighted.
That's very interesting. I think I have one more question, and then we can move to a different topic. But let's say you're starting your sales outbound reach, and right now you have a small team, you have a small budget. How do you effectively assign resources to work? Like, how do you put your strategy, basically, your outreach strategy? Do you start by cold calling immediately, or like, or you start with like emails and then cold calling and then you spend more time? Like, do you start with having an SDR for cold calling, or and then AE? Like, if you have really small tight budget and you're a founder, how do you go about it? How do you structure your sales effort?
It's a very good question. I think I'll try and keep it brief because I know I go into a bit too much detail, but
We still have time.
yeah, sounds
This
good.
is this is super insightful, so go ahead. Yeah.
My pleasure. I love that. So there's a few factors to consider, and it all goes down to the stage you're at. Again, I've repeated this maybe twice. Is the stage you're at, how you're powering all the other channels. So you break down all the outreach channels that you want to leverage and how each of them is supporting the other. Depending on that strategy, you can then decide what to start off with. I have a massive bias around emails. I actually used to be the biggest email fan. When I was an SDR myself, I did incredibly well on the phone, but also it was almost 50-50 phone and email. They used to work. That was 5 years ago, roughly. And what we're seeing today is Microsoft, Google, most email providers are completely cracking down on email deliverability. It's becoming incredibly tough. And I can say this because we have lots of customers that are, surprisingly enough, email agencies, and they're using Salesfinity, which is a phone call AI automation platform, to actually build business. You could ask yourself the question, if email worked so well, you wouldn't need to really even touch the phone. So, given my bias, which I'm happy to admit, because obviously we do what we do, um, I think the phone is the best way to start, and I'll tell you why. Because if you send an email, it's very static. You think you have the right message, you send it to lots of people, and you probably never hear back because it takes maybe 10,000 emails now to book a meeting or something crazy like that, or 1,000 emails. Um, Even if you book a meeting, you don't really know why. So there's nothing better than, as a starting company, whether it's the founder, pick up the phone, speak to your target audience or to your ICP, go in with different messages and see what resonates. You can then use that to dictate what you have on your website, your overall messaging, because as much as founders, we love to dream and think about, hey, this sounds fantastic. Three, four founders get in a room, they get super excited about the new message, the new website. But we don't sell solutions to ourselves, right? We sell solutions to our ICP. That's what we're building for. So we have to let them decide. Very, very hard to let anyone dictate your messaging or validate any hypothesis you have on email or any other channel. On the phone, if a message that, hey, I'm not interested, I'm not looking for this solution. Absolutely, I understood. No worries at all. Mind me asking why. Just that one question can make or break your startup, right? You get so many insights. So I feel like if you're going to spend time, spend it on the phone. If you are in a country that allows you to cold call and that has obviously cold call culture in some way, because then you can gather product insights. Hey, we've gone with your competitor. We already bought a solution for this. Oh, do you mind me asking which and why? What made you decide to go for them? Now your product team has insights. You as a founder or CEO have insights around your vision, your product strategy. There's so much more that you can get out of a phone call compared to any other channel. You either get ignored or you just get a yes or no. And from my experience, if you get a no and you send an email, hey, why not? Or whatever, you just won't get a reply. Whereas on the phone, you can gather so many insights. So the way we kind of built Salesfinity and why it's a crowded space, there's lots of dialers, etc. It's really around this whole strategy of you're enabling your entire go-to-market strategy by making calls. You're not just booking meetings, you're gathering competitive intelligence, product intelligence, insights. You're validating your messaging. You're validating the messaging on your website. You're validating the key value propositions you mention in your discovery, in your demos. So it's to my from my opinion, it's the best strategy or the best channel to leverage starting off.
That's that's great. Thank you so much for adding that. I think to your point, I think our next topic is actually AI. Uh, how do you see AI? What's your take on like all the AI, SDR, AI, sales agents, and everything AI right now? Like I think everyone's building AI. I think AI is great and it's super, super useful in automating a lot of things and making people more efficient. But yeah, what's your take on specifically automating everything? Will AI replace salespeople? I think this is a question that everyone's talking about.
So ever since I've been in tech, I've solely been doing AI and data. So I am obviously I'm very passionate about AI. So anything I say is not because I'm anti AI, but it's really because of the some of the insights of some of the experiences that we've gathered in the past few years. Um, AI is incredibly important. It's changed everyone's life, especially when it comes to go to market. Because let's just take Ginni for example, right? Instead of hiring sales managers and developing, I mean, relying on other people to give you some sort of structure to build your team on and to be able to have you know coaching or go for external coaching, you get AI to do it. Because if you feed AI with all the information and all the data it needs, it will be just as pretty much just as knowledgeable as a human, you can argue, right? Self-affinity as well. AI allows. So I saw a question here. I know I shouldn't be answering questions yet, but how do we overcome people from? How do we overcome the hurdle of people not picking up the phone? We use AI. Self-affinity is an AI platform, so there's an AI technology built in that identifies whether it's you're calling a human or a machine or a bad number, etc., and then it makes sure that you don't waste time on people that don't answer the phone or machines. So it's incredibly important, right? You asked me the question as well about if I'm a very small team and I have two or three people or just founders, how do we kick off our go-to-market strategy? Again, you have to leverage AI and automation. However, I think there's a fine line between leveraging AI and replacing everything you do with AI. And that's where a lot of people are, in my opinion, going down an absolute yeah, they're not going in a very fantastic direction, in my opinion, especially when it comes to AI SDRs. Go to market is all about, unless you're selling to robots, then okay, maybe you can just replace your whole go to market with AI. But we're selling to humans. I don't think humans will ever get to the point where AI will be able to replace another human interaction. Maybe for emails, maybe for or whatever, developing the messaging, helping the website, whatever. But any human to human interaction is called human to human for a reason. So you can't replace AI. You can't replace humans with AI. You can only make them better using AI. I know this is very overused. Everyone says it like, oh, we can't replace humans with AI, but the best humans will use AI, blah, blah, blah. It's honestly true. So when it comes to go to market, just remember you're selling to humans, and we've seen it already. Like there's been AI psychologists, AI doctors, AI this and that. So far, none of them has been really groundbreaking. They've received lots of funding, but it doesn't mean they've actually built revenue or made a big impact. It's just because humans will never be able to overcome that human to human connection. When I was a pharmacist, I was actually a specialist in mental health. So this is very, very important for me because I worked in mental health hospitals in the psychiatric wards. I saw the impact of a human to human interaction. It makes a massive difference to your buying decisions, to how you're convinced about something, to your trust. I don't think AI will ever be able to get us there yet. But I could be completely wrong because the market and VCs and a few hyped up people are obviously saying very different stuff.
Um, I can add my input here. I think, I agree. I think AI is incredibly amazing and it's changing how we interact with everything. And I think everyone should be using AI, but it's an empowerment tool. It's not replacement. It's not replacing people. I think it will generate more jobs and it will help you actually achieve more. And as a founder, we're starting and we're utilizing AI in like literally everything. And um, I do maybe like 2, 3x of what I can do in a day because I'm using AI to help me automate a lot of things. I think if we are a bigger team, it would be the same. We can do more, we can achieve more, we can scale faster, but still we'll need more people to actually oversee and manage and orchestrate all of that. I AI in sales, I think I have a similar view on what you're saying. I don't think we are in any position like replacing salespeople. I think salespeople should be using AI to actually be more efficient and achieve more. So a smaller team can actually win more deals and focus on the right deals to close them and generate more revenue than having just like tons of AEs and SDRs in the team. Um, Funny enough, I have been doing a research lately on AI, SDR, and all of these tools, similar sales agents, because I wanted to actually use them since we are a small team. So instead of hiring someone to do that, why don't we use AI? And I don't think it's I don't think it's actually cost effective. I think it's actually very expensive. right now. So everyone who's promoting their product as it's cheaper than hiring or it's like fraction of what you would pay for a human and all of that, I don't think this is true. It may be the way they structure their product, but for it to actually work, I think it can be very expensive, and you still need to manage it to set it up and to keep like monitoring and all of that. And yeah, I asked them about conversions, which is a totally different like topic. We can spend an hour talking about this. I think it's still we're not there yet. But I think the technology is moving very fast, so you'll see different directions. But I think we need to. I think people who are building AI products, we need to rethink the new experience with AI, not try to replicate what we do right now. So building something totally different or reimagining the sales process from the beginning. I think for enterprise sales, it will still be the same for some time. We're not there to replace like a robot can take the demo meeting and give you like a full demo and negotiate pricing and all of that. Technology is there, yes, maybe with delay and everything, but like, is it effective? I'm not sure. Does the enterprise people actually want to buy from a robot? We always get annoyed when we, like, even with call centers, when we try to book something or inquire about something and we have a robot on the other side. So I think it's an interesting space, and we'll see. I think it's a hype, and it will actually cool down, and then only the innovative people will stand out by building like a real value around the product.
I absolutely agree. And I think one thing you said is very interesting. I think leveraging AI, you have to make it suit whatever you're doing. So if you're in an enterprise space, again, we're so many years away from leveraging, I mean, replacing humans with AI because average enterprise sales or deal cycle is somewhere between 6 all the way up to 18 months. I've seen even more. I've seen 2 year deal cycles, depending on how big the size of the deal is. There is absolutely there's just no way AI will be able to replace that because it includes the thing like in-person visits and so many things that we just cannot replicate with AI. I think if you're selling a very, very lightweight, maybe B2C solution, potentially something in the 10 to 50 or 10 to $100 a month range, kind of single licenses, very, very transactional, then maybe an AI SDR could be beneficial, or some sort of human replacement with AI could be beneficial. We're still not fully there yet, but it's definitely more beneficial than if you're having a more complex go-to-market motion. So it really depends on what you're doing also and what you're selling and what your average deal cycle looks like.
Yeah. One interesting thing that we are doing at Ginni is we recognize that sales managers, as you said, they're very busy. They can't be on every call. And if you really want an optimized team, you want everyone to be on back-to-back meetings or on calls all the day. Um, so a human can't actually be on every call, listen to every call. If you're managing like three, four, five people, you can't really listen to everything, even after the call. So, but the AI can actually do it. And if you really put good uh, criteria and playbook and everything and good context, you can actually get a pretty good feedback and highlight to the sales manager what they really should care about and highlight to the team which deals should they focus on. So AI is actually more empowering to them to optimize their time and decide when or how they want to spend their time on which deals, so they can have a better win rate. So I think that kind of AI is actually more empowering than replacing, which is interesting. Yeah, I think we have a lot of questions and we have little time. So I think the last question to close this is how to utilize actually AI in the end-to-end outbound sales, like outside? Do you have any tips, any recommendations, any favorite tools or ways for sales team to utilize AI in not only in the sales call, but like everything from prospecting, lead generation to closing the deal?
It's a very good question, and I mean, as deeply immersed in this kind of AI go-to-market space as I am, I think if you are again in the transactional sale, high velocity, maybe like SMB, there might be a few tools. I think we hear about Clay popping up all the time, right? I don't know if Clay is really classified as an AI tool, but it's definitely a tool that can help people have. It's basically like RevOps. It's an AI RevOps machine that helps you find new accounts, find similar accounts, enrich data, etc., etc. Plug lots of different sources together, um, and really the whole ecosystem around Clay. To be completely frank, there's so many different tools for email. If you want to send like mass email, the thing is, there's a big difference between AI and automation, right? And I feel like there's not that much AI in outbound B2B yet, like real AI machine learning.
Mm.
There's a lot of automation. So I feel like the go-to-market industry or salespeople are very excited about AI, but when you really think about it, there's not that much AI happening in go-to-market. It's a lot of automation. So all of these things I can mention are probably pretty much automation. I mean, there's tools like Smart Lead. I mean, this one might be very relevant for people here. Instantly and Smart Lead for emails. You can send thousands of emails a day, have multi-domain registration, domain rotation, and then use some people will. I mean, those tools now have a level of AI included built into them too. So you can extract certain information like I'm out of office. The AI will then automatically resume the sequence when they come back, things like that. If they don't reply after 5, 6 emails, you then send those contacts to perhaps obviously Salesfinity, to then email call them with AI. When you have the meeting booked, you then plug it into Ginni because you want to have the discovery call monitored, and you want to have real life analysis and coaching and things like that. So that's as far as AI goes. And obviously for each of those products, there's many different competitors and alternatives. But I just don't think there's real AI in this space yet, unless I'm just living under a rock. But I haven't found real AI. There's like for if you have accounts, if you have your ICP, there's tools like Ocean, where you can plug your ICP or some accounts, your best accounts, and it will find your lookalikes. I hope Ocean isn't watching this, but it's very inaccurate from my experience. Again, this might be accurate for B2C where you have thousands of potential accounts or very small companies. But most people that are trying to get a sizable deal size, we're really not there yet. There's so much automation though, and it's very beneficial, but it's also very harmful on the other side.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the Q&A. I think we have a few questions over here. Um, how do we, how do you know quickly we are talking with the right customer decision maker, and how is it different to uh, uh, each level of the deal size?
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the question. How do we know that we
We're
are
talking
talking
to
with?
the right decision maker or customer.
Okay, I mean, if the problem doesn't resonate and they are unable to give you detailed answers, most likely either they don't care about the project or they're not the main person that's facing the issue. That's obviously the biggest or the fastest way to identify that. The third component of the cold call, for example, where you just ask questions, that's the part where you verify whether you're speaking to the right person or not. So based on the questions you ask, which are meant to be qualification questions, if they're giving you very deep, very short, very uninsightful, very non-descriptive answers, then most likely they're not the right person because if you really have a solution that solves a real problem, then at least they'll validate it. Maybe they'll tell you have another solution, but the problem does validate. If they just don't recognize what you're talking about, then most likely they are not the right person. And then I wouldn't give up on the account. I would then use them to maybe identify, okay, who else do you reckon would care about this? Sounds like you're not too involved in this sort of decision. Who else would you recommend me speak to? Those kind of questions to then get a referral. You then go on to that referral, mention all the insights you've gathered from that one call from the person that wasn't the decision maker to try and get a bit further in the conversation. So that's pretty much it. If you ask the right questions and obviously, unless your whole solution is just not very effective because it doesn't solve real problems, you should be able to identify whether you're speaking to the right person or not by asking good questions.
That's great. Thank you, Omar. Okay, another question. I'm now facing the issue that customers are not easy to find leads for, and even using Apollo, sometimes calls are not answered or wrong numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's of course.
Uh, there is a lot of tools. So Apollo is one tool. I think it depends on your geography, your target audience. There's other tools who are more accurate in certain areas. So if you're in the Middle East, uh, there's other tools. If you are in the US, there's other tools. What's your take on?
Yeah, absolutely accurate, I would say. Apollo was kind of built to be mainly for the smaller companies, SMB founders, etc. Um, we're seeing that their data quality is really going down. So lots of people are pretty much kind of anyway. Don't want to mention too much information about Apollo. Still a very great tool, but I feel like they're focusing on a few other things like sequencing, calendar scheduling, so many things that's been distracting their focus away from the data quality. So anyone noticing slightly inaccurate data with Apollo, then it I'm not surprised to hear. Um, there's so many tools. I think the best way to go about it today, thinking about automation is waterfall enrichment. Is something that's being spoken about quite a lot. Where you don't use one data provider, but we use multiple ones through a waterfall system. There's so many providers that do some stuff like that. Like Clay is actually one of them. Celsinity, we do it too. Finding you phone numbers through 10 or 12 different data providers. So instead of using one, you use them all. So I would look into waterfall data enrichment if you are not having very good results with just one data provider. And regardless, I would never just use one data provider. I'd use at least two or three.
Perfect. Best methods to obtain accurate data for cold calling to ensure targeted and effective outreach. I think it's the same question. I think you already answered this.
Yeah.
Perfect. What's a good conversion rate from connection to conversation? We touched into
From
this.
a
Yeah,
connection. Okay. Yeah. I think a good one would be something between anywhere above 50% is pretty much good. World class would be somewhere around
50%.
50% from a conversation, from a connection to a conversation, not to a meeting booked. So
Okay.
50% of the calls should last more than 45 seconds or more than a minute. That's
Okay.
like very good. In reality, if you're somewhere between 30% to 35%, then you're doing pretty well. World class, which is unrealistic, is somewhere between 60 and 70%. But basically, if you're anywhere between 30 and 50%, I think you're doing okay.
Okay. And curious to know, like from conversation to actually next step. It doesn't have to be booking a meeting, but a meeting or referral or interest. What's the conversion rate? What should you aim for?
I mean the widely known conversion rate is 10%. 10% of your conversations should lead to a meeting, um, which I think is not very realistic. It doesn't really happen all the time. But 10% to completion is definitely a lot more realistic. If you're just aiming for a completion, which is a referral or a disqualification or a meeting booked or yeah, mainly those three, then you should aim for somewhere between 10 to 20%. But if you are at 10%, then I wouldn't be worried at all because that's still pretty good.
Perfect. Um, okay, how do you overcome the hurdle of people not answering the phone? I think the same question. We answered this. How do we interact with Omar? How can people reach you, Omar?
I think the question was at the beginning, it was around how do they interact in this live, right?
Uh, and I think, okay, let's
Uh,
take it to the other way. How can people reach you if they are interested
I
to
am,
reach you, chat with you,
yeah,
know
of
more
course.
about Sainsfinity?
Yeah, the only social media I use is actually LinkedIn. I don't have anything else. So LinkedIn, you just type my name, Omar Aboufandi, and you'll find me there. Maybe try have some sort of interesting message because uh, I'm not very good with responding. So if it's yeah, say anything crazy and catch my attention, and we can have a chat for sure.
Actually, our first interaction was on LinkedIn. We
Yes.
just chatted on LinkedIn and then we met. We had a call and then, yeah, it happened. And now we're talking more often. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just
Uh,
LinkedIn. I only interact on LinkedIn. Emails, maybe. My email is omar@selfinity.co.co if you want to send an email. So yeah, I'm always happy to share insights or help wherever possible.
I think the last question, it's not really a question, but like a comment on something we mentioned. Like Abdu is saying, I really hope AI replace doctors. Are we saying I shouldn't be hopeful in this regard?
My brother is a doctor. If you ask him that question, he'd get very upset.
Yeah.
He tells me on a daily basis how AI should replace some doctors that he works with. So I think you can still have hope because coming from real like practice, um, depends on where you are, but some of the standards of doctors just has gone downhill quite a lot. It's very commercial, I'm finding, especially in the Middle East. Doctors are more commercial than actually wanting to help. So maybe we can have some hope about AI doctors. But yeah, I think we're definitely like 5, 10 years away.
We have a one last minute question addressing the actual problem of targeted segment plays a huge part. Any tips to effectively do this? Uh, yeah, I think
Addressing
this is related to segmentation of your ICP and having a different like problem statement to each persona. Do you have any tips to effectively, uh, I think, figure out this?
So is the question around how do you do the segmentation or how do you make the most of your segment? Because okay, maybe I can give a more general answer, but I think as much as we think the segmentation looks a bit beautiful and fantastic, it's only a hypothesis. So segmentation is a continuous process. You can reshuffle certain personas, certain problem statements. Um, so it's a lot of trial and error, and it depends on what stage you're at. If you're a founder who has an incredible idea and thinks the market will be very recipient to it, then you just have to pick up the phone or send emails or meet people and validate the different segmentations and the problem statements and all those things within the segments to validate your hypothesis. I think to do it effectively, you just have to speak to people. And when you speak to your targets, or I keep saying target audience, but it should really be ICP. When you speak to your ICP, even if it's not, even if they're not interested, or whether the conversation doesn't lead into a direction that you want, use it as an opportunity to ask for feedback. I mean, this is like founder 101. It's asking feedback, right? So use that feedback to continuously have a dynamic segmentation. Don't make it static. That's a very, I think, common issue I'm seeing across founders where we are just said that this should be the message, this is the problem, it's going to have to sell. And you keep trying different approaches or different channels, but you don't ever try and change the actual message or your actual outreach approach. So make it dynamic, not static, is what I would say.
I would actually double down on this because this is something I'm very interested in because usually what I see is you have a couple of people on the team who are they use different language or they know how to find their way with customers, and then if you have a script, everyone else is following a script. So I think trial and error and doing a lot of like sales experiments and talking to different people and trying testing different messages and making sure that you actually document all of that and document the results is very very important. And yeah, so one thing that we are trying to with Jenny we're trying to help is actually identify why your top reps are actually converting, because usually it's as easy as they are saying the right words at the right time or answering a question in a certain way. It's the same answer, but they are more I don't know, passionate. They are more emphasized with the customer on the pain point. So it can be the tiny things, and this is one thing that we are trying to capture and give it to customers in a way that they can take it forward, actionable, and then share that with teams. So I think a lot of trial and error and the more and more conversations, it's an ongoing learning experience, and then documenting that to find the results and then like pick the right formula. And I think this is something that will keep changing because your product is evolving, the market is evolving. So it's not like a set formula that you figured it out and they will keep using it forever. Your product is actually evolving every day. You're adding more features, you're expanding your offering, you're expanding to new ICPs or different personas. Um, I hope this is helpful, but this is something that we are trying to do ourselves.
Absolutely. I think that's very helpful because I think people can't afford Pareto's law anymore, where 80%, 20% of reps bring in 80% of revenue or 20% produce 80% of results. We can't afford it anymore because the economy is changing, everything is changing so far. So I think what you're doing is incredibly important and exciting as well to help have that. We always say like playbook, but when I hear playbook, it sounds very static. Sounds like you're doing it in a more dynamic way where it's constantly evolving because that's super exciting. And the best reps are always up to date with the latest news with their ICP. So if you can help uh, bring that behavior to other reps using AI, it's I think very exciting.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we're on time.